Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the Tunisian Dawn Sunglasses Case, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description, or you can search mooglyblog.com Tunisian Dawn Sunglasses Case for the free written pattern, as well as links to all the supplies you need. There will also be right and left-handed video tutorials. To make this pattern, you need one skein of Patons Alpaca blend and a USJ 6mm Tunisian crochet hook. This one is by Susan Bates. We also need our standard crochet supplies, yarn needle, scissors, stitch markers are always handy, but we also need one more supply for this project, and that's this particular kind of kiss clasp or spring clasp or spring clip. It goes by a few different names. I do have a link where you can go ahead and get those. They come sort of with this clasp, and then there are these pins that hold them together. And we use this to create our sunglasses case's opening, just like that. Just like the ones you see in stores, you just give it a little squeeze there on the ends and it pops right open. It's all enclosed in our crochet, so you can use these to make really any custom size pouch you want. These come in different widths, and while I made this to size for my sunglasses, you could make it longer to hold crochet hooks or knitting needles or whatever you like. The Tunisian Dawn Sunglasses Case is actually worked flat. Now if you can see here, it's folded, and then right here it's seamed. We basically make a flat washcloth shape, working this direction from the bottom up. Then you can see inside here, there's just a couple rounds, or rows rather, that we use to fold over and encase or create the sleeve for our clasp right there. But after we do that, then we just fold it in half, seam it right down the side and across the bottom for our custom case. This features the Honeycomb Stitch that you can see right here, and I'll demonstrate that for you now. Now, as you've probably figured out, this pattern uses Tunisian crochet. To begin, we start with a slip knot and then chain 27, just as we normally do, just using this longer, straighter hook. Then, for our first row, it's sort of a standard Tunisian foundation row. We skip the chain closest to the hook, and then working into the back humps only, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, and pull up a loop. And then simply leave that loop on your hook. Go to the next chain, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. We're going to do that in each one of these chains across, except for that very first one, the one closest to the hook, that one right there. Because with Tunisian crochet, unlike with regular crochet, we're going to count these loops on our hook as our stitches, so that active loop that we had at the beginning that we don't normally count as a stitch, for Tunisian, it kind of counts. It's a little different that way. So with Tunisian, however many stitches you chain is how many stitches you should end up with on your hook for your standard foundation row. That, of course, excludes fancier stitches that have lace work and where you might be skipping stitches. So I'm going to pull up a little bit more yarn here. So simply continue to work across, pulling up a loop from each chain until you've reached your slip knot. So at the end of the forward pass of your foundation row, you should have 27 loops on your hook. Then we do the return pass, and all the return passes for this pattern are all worked the same, a standard return pass. We start by chaining one, then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops, continuing that all the way across until you've worked back down to just 1 loop left on your hook. This is how we'll work off these return passes for every row of this pattern until we get to those last 2 rows and work standard crochet. So here we are down to our last 2 loops. We pull through and we have 1 loop left on our hook. And this will count as the first stitch for our next row. So now we're ready to begin row 2. We're going to skip that first stitch, by which we mean that first vertical bar right there, because we've got our first loop on our hook right there. And then we're going to Tunisian simple stitch in the next stitch. So that means we insert our hook under that front vertical bar, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Then we need to work a Tunisian purl stitch in the next stitch. To work a Tunisian purl stitch, we move our yarn to the front of our work. You can go ahead and drop it if you need to. Insert your hook the same way under that front vertical loop. Then we can pick up that yarn again, yarn over, make sure to yarn over from behind and over the top of your hook like we always do with crochet, and then simply pull that loop through that bar, and that is a Tunisian purl stitch. Then we Tunisian simple stitch in the next stitch, go behind that front vertical bar, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then Tunisian purl stitch across. We're going to keep going all the way across, Tunisian purl stitch, Tunisian simple stitch, Tunisian purl stitch, Tunisian simple stitch, until one stitch remains. So let's do a couple more of those together. Next is a Tunisian purl stitch, so we want to pull our yarn to the front of our work, insert your hook behind that front vertical bar, and pull the yarn up and over your hook and through that loop. Then on to the next stitch for a Tunisian simple stitch. Oop. Try that again. There we go. That one's quite simple. Pull that one on up. Then, if you want to try and hold onto your yarn, the way I like to do it is I just use my hook to sort of push it right out of the way. Go into that next stitch. Then I can wrap over with that yarn and pull it through. So whether you want to drop it when you're first learning it, but then sort of work out your own way to hold the yarn, whatever is comfortable for you, as long as you get the stitch made, is totally fine. So you just continue to alternate those stitches across until you get to that very last stitch. So for row 2, you work all the way across, alternating those 2 stitches, ending with a Tunisian simple stitch and 1 stitch remaining. However, for the last stitch, we don't want to go under just that first vertical bar. Instead, we're going to insert our hook under both of these bars at the side here, sort of that V on the end of our row. Sometimes you have to get under them individually here, especially for these first couple rows. There we are. And then simply yarn over and pull our loop up from there. That will give us a much nicer finished edge right here when it comes time to seam up our project. So at the end of row 2, just like all these rows, you should end with 27 loops on your hook. Then it's time for the return pass, and this return pass is the exact same, again, as all the others in this pattern. We simply yarn over and pull through the first loop there to chain 1, and then yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, all the way across until just 1 loop remains on our hook. Okay, so this is what it should look like at the end of row 2, and now we're ready to begin row 3. Row 3 is going to be very similar to row 2, but we want to switch our stitches so that we have simple stitches worked into purls and purls worked into our simple stitches. So that means, once again, we skip that first one because we've got that loop on our hook that counts as our very first stitch, but now we're going to Tunisian purl stitch in the first or the second stitch there. So we can pull that yarn down in front of our hook, go under that loop, yarn over, and pull that stitch through. Then we begin our 2-stitch repeat, Tunisian simple stitch, Tunisian purl stitch. Those same 2 stitches all the way across. It really blew my mind when I learned this pattern that I had really admired for so long, that it really was just these 2 stitches over and over again all the way across. It really combines to make such a beautiful stitch pattern. So simply continue to work in each loop across, alternating those stitches until we get to that very last stitch. Now, since we've been alternating, the last stitch before the last stitch, the penultimate stitch, if you will, should be a Tunisian purl stitch. And then we've come to that very last stitch right there. And the same thing, we want to make sure we go under both of those loops right along the outside. You can almost kind of turn it sideways and think of it as working under the top 2 loops. That's what it looks like. Pull that yarn up and through. And now we've got 27 loops on our hook again, and we're ready for that standard return pass. Chain 1, and then yarn over and pull through 2 all the way across. So this is what your fabric should look like at the end of row 3. To continue making our pouch, we repeat rows 2 and 3 many more times until we've worked a total of 23 rows, or until your case is as long as you want it to be. We're going to be folding it this way to seam it up. So if you want a longer or a shorter case, if you're making it for reading glasses rather than sunglasses, so you don't need it to be as big, you don't necessarily need to work as many rows. This will determine the length of your case. The important thing is just to end on a row 3 repeat. Now I've worked 2 more rows so you can really see that beautiful stitch pattern starting to develop. You may also notice that your fabric really wants to curl. Don't worry about it. When we fold it over and seam it all up, that curl will be sewn right on out of our swatch. So now let's go ahead and pretend that I just want a really tiny little short case, and I want to go ahead and make the clasp sleeve. Now, these 2 rows are worked in standard crochet, but it's a really interesting sort of mix of the two. We're going to be doing linked double crochet stitches, which are kind of like little mini Tunisian rows. And for this first row, we want to work them as they are Tunisian stitches. We still want to work under those vertical bars because we're not binding off our Tunisian row here. And as you can see, Tunisian rows have a little bit more air until you work that next row into them. So it's kind of an unusual move. Just stick with me here and let's go ahead and make it together. We're going to start with a chain of 3. 1, 2, 3, and this is going to count as our first double crochet. So if you want to, you can go ahead and put a stitch marker right in that 3rd chain. There we go. Alrighty. Then we're going to continue across with linked double crochets. If you want to, at this point, if it's easier for you, you can switch to a standard crochet hook. We don't need to use the Tunisian hook anymore. What we're going to do is find that 2nd stitch from our hook. We've marked the top of this one. This one's going to be our double crochet, but we want to find that 2nd chain we made, go into the back hump of it just like we did when we were starting our Tunisian project, yarn over and pull up a loop. And then since we're making the 2nd stitch right now, we're going to skip that bar right there, go to the next bar, and we're going to go under that bar as for a Tunisian simple stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. Our linked double crochet. To make the next one, we want to insert our hook right under that horizontal bar right in the middle of our stitch. Well, if we turn it that way, it's a vertical bar, just like we've been doing. Basically, go right under that bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we come to the next stitch. We want to maintain the stitch pattern we've been having right here. So we went to Tunisian Purl Stitch. Come behind your yarn, go under that loop, yarn over, pull that loop up and through, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Let's continue across for a couple more. We go under that horizontal bar, but you can turn it if you like. Go right under that bar in the middle of your double crochet, yarn over and pull up a loop. Find the next stitch of the previous row here. Now it's time for another Tunisian simple stitch. So we go right in there, yarn over, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now I need to pull up a little bit more yarn. There we go. That was a simple, so the next one will be a purl. We go under that center bar there, yarn over and pull up a loop. Find that next stitch, come behind our yarn, insert our hook, yarn over, pull that loop up and through. I always like to give it a little bit of wiggle so it doesn't end up super loose right there. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. So we just alternate those 2 stitches all the way across until we get to the very end. So let's work 2 more before we get to the end. Insert your hook right under that center loop, yarn over and pull up your loop. Find that next stitch, Tunisian simple stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. Insert your hook under that center bar, yarn over and pull up a loop. For the purl version, get your yarn in front of your hook and in front of your work, insert in that loop, yarn over and pull up your loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. So continue alternating those 2 linked double crochet styles until we get to the end. So I've continued to make those linked double crochets, alternating how I'm working into the previous row. Now we're at that very last stitch. So we just want to handle that sort of the same way that we handled the last stitch of the previous rows on our forward passes. We go under that vertical bar again. Then we come down and go under those 2 side loops. You can see now that we've got a few more rows here, how really working under those 2 side loops really creates a really nice, beautiful edge there. Sort of looks like our standard crochet stitches there. Let's go ahead and pull up our loop there and then simply yarn over and pull through 2 and yarn over and pull through 2. So rather than binding off our Tunisian with a standard Tunisian bind off, we've bound it off with these linked double crochets. This does a couple things. It gives us a really nice solid sleeve for our clasp. We do need to add one more row to finish it. But what's interesting is that the linked line right here, that horizontal line that we made by making these linked stitches, you can see how that pushes it back this direction as well. And it's just going to create a really nice, crisp, even edge to our Tunisian crochet there, while giving us a really nice, solid section for our sleeve. So we do have one more row. We need to make this obviously a little bit bigger so it fits that clasp in there. So our one turn of the pattern, we're going to turn here at the end of that first row of linked double crochet and chain 3, or chain 3 and turn, however you like to do it. And then we're going to linked double crochet in each stitch across. Now, if this chain 3 counts as our first stitch again, I just kind of turn it back over here. We're going to go into that second stitch, or the second chain from our hook there. Yarn over and pull up our loop. Then you can turn afterwards if it's a little bit easier. Now remember that chain 3 is going to count as our first stitch. So now we're working into the tops basically of regular crochet stitches. We still want to skip that first one and come to our second stitch. Yarn over and pull up our loop, and yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. For the rest of this row, it's really standard linked double crochet stitches. We go under that center vertical bar there, yarn over and pull up our loop, find the next stitch, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up our loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So we simply continue this all the way across until we've got another 27 stitches. So now we have finished our second row of linked double crochet. You can see we're on the wrong side of our fabric. Here's that pretty side, here's the wrong side. Now we want to go ahead and cut our yarn, but let's go ahead and cut a good long length so we can use it for seaming. For the case as written up, I recommend leaving about 48 inches. My case, of course, here, little short guy, won't take nearly as much, but we can just go ahead and cut our yarn, leave it long to seam it up. If you forget to leave a long enough length for seaming, of course, you can just cut a new length of yarn. But now we just want to go ahead and finish it up. You can pull through that loop, but I prefer to just go ahead and pull on up there and avoid adding another knot. And then it is time to add our clasp. Here is a closer look at the clasp. You can see it just opens right up like this, and it's hinged, but it wants to just be this direction. So we want to make sure that we lay this up in here. And then there's going to be a really great fold right there. That center portion of that first row of linked double crochet, that horizontal bar, that's where it naturally just wants to fold right on over to create that sleeve. So I do recommend you go ahead and put that in there as you sew. But I like to go ahead and flip it over upside down, and then I'm going to find that end here, get that on my yarn needle. There we are. Pull that through to a good length. All right. So as I say, we just want to make sure that we're enclosing that clasp. Because it's a little rough, you don't want to necessarily be sliding in and out, so we can just lay that right inside. Now, the great thing about Tunisian is that on the back side of our work, it's kind of like knitting in that we'll have this great little row of humps right there, and we can find the one right at the end here and just start sewing right into that. That way, we're not going to create a seam that you can see from the outside of the case. We're just sewing the inside loops here, sort of in the backs of our stitches. So you can just work your way across, sewing each stitch in the final row here to the back of one of these stitches. It really does create a really clean look. You can't see those stitches at all from the outside of the case. So we simply continue to work your way across. If you mess up your alignment, you realize you've got one more stitch in one row that you didn't sew to up here. It doesn't matter. It's just a casing inside your sunglasses case. No one's going to see it once it's all assembled. So if you need to reuse one of these loops twice, or you realize you skipped one, it's no big deal at all. We just want to create a really nice solid case to enclose that clasp. So continue working on across, and I will see you when we're ready for the next step. So now I've sewn all the way across. You can see the end of my sleeve right there. The clasp is just peeking out. And because, frankly, I'm a lazy crocheter, I don't want more ends to weave in, I'm just going to send my needle right to the top of that little sleeve right there, sort of almost weaving that end in a little bit, but I'm not going to cut it. I'm just going to let that hang. We're going to be picking that up again here in just a minute. First things first, though, we need to close up this clasp. And this part is kind of permanent. You might need to squeeze it out of your sleeve a little bit there. Go ahead and just really shove that down. Give yourself some room to work with here. So if you look closely, you can see how this little section here fits in between these little guys. We just want to squeeze those and sort of line them up with your fingers as best you can. And then we take these tiny little pins that also come with the clasp, and we slide that right in to that barrel there, basically. Let's see. We want to, it's open at the top right here. I was trying from the wrong end. We can slide it in that first one and then sort of hold it there, get that lined up. Might have to finagle it for a few minutes, but we just want to send that pin through all 3 sections. There it goes. So you really just push that in as far as it goes, and then it slides right down in there when it's all lined up. And believe it or not, that really will stay put. I haven't had any issues with mine popping back open at all. If you want to, though, there's a little tab here that you could use some tools to really bend down to keep that permanently in place. So once you've got your clasp secured, then it's time to hide it. We're going to snug it right back down into our fabric. And now our yarn is right in place to begin our seaming. Just pull it right down around. You can see now our kiss clasp is working, but we need to add some seaming to close up our pouch. So now we're in the right spot. We can simply sew through these sides right here. So if you want to, you can try and match up those stitches however you like to do it. You could use whip stitch if you wanted to. I did more of a running stitch where I just find my end here. That's that end trying to sneak in, and then come back from this side and go through that stitch. And now we've got these really beautiful stitches here on the sides that line up well and look really nice for seaming. So I just went back and forth, but you could use whatever seaming style you desire. You could get fancy with it. You could crochet the seam rather than sewing it if you prefer. It's absolutely up to you how you'd like to finish it off. But we simply continue to sew down the side. Make sure you get those first few stitches really tight to hide that clasp. But then we just work down the side until we get to the bottom of our pouch, however long that takes, however long you decided to make your pouch. Again, the original is 23 rows, which gave me about an 8.5 inch length, which worked well for my sort of oversized sunglasses that I like to wear. There we are. And then when you get down to the bottom, probably want to go ahead and weave in this end so it stops torturing you like mine's trying to torture me. But then we just go ahead and sew right across the bottom here. There we go. Again, you probably want to weave that in before you do your final seaming. But we just sew right across the bottom of our pouch the same way we sewed down along the side to close it up. And that is about it. After that, you'll be all ready to use your sunglasses pouch. As you can see, that clasp just opens right on up, and it's a great size for fitting your sunglasses through. But if you wanted to get different sizes, they do sell those kiss clasps in other sizes. And that's how to crochet and assemble the Tunisian Dawn Sunglasses Case. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll give this pattern a try. It's a lot of fun. Don't forget, you can find the pattern, links to the supplies, and the video tutorials at mooglyblog.com, Tunisian Dawn Sunglasses Case. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.